Thank you, Michael Bowe and Mountaintop Marketing for this honor tonight. To make it, I want to say a few words, but essentially, I have been privileged and honored to be placed at a point in time in our history when events were unfolding before me that compelled me to respond to opportunities that was put before me to advance the racial equality and social and economic equality in America for racial minorities. During the time when I was early meetings with Dr. Martin Luther King, sitting in some folding chairs at Winston-Salem, North Carolina on a college campus, and having a private dinner with Thurgood Marshall at Club Excelsior in Charlotte, North Carolina, and having a private breakfast with A. Philip Randolph in a little luncheonette on Beatty Ford Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was just A. Philip Randolph, myself, and the owner of the luncheonette. All of those conversation experiences instilled in me a sense of duty at that time to do whatever I could to advance the cause of racial equality in the space that I occupied at that time. And Anthony Robinson, I regret that he had to leave early, but Anthony Robinson and I was working together during those periods, during the early 40s, 40 years ago, when we were starting the minority business development programs in this country. The decade before that, in the 60s, I was part of the civil rights movement, I was the student leader in Charlotte, North Carolina, the co-leader there, student organizer. But during the 60s, when we were doing community action, building model neighborhoods, that was a process that took almost a decade. But then came the late 60s, early 70s, the national strategy shifted to business development as a way of eliminating poverty and creating wealth in minority neighborhoods. At that time, they were called the ghettos of America. And Dr. Henry Clark wrote the famous book, Youth in the Ghetto. He was the guru of minority economic development in communities at that time. I knew Dr. Clark, and he was a ferocious advocate for that cause. But then in the late 60s, led by the theoretical underpinning by Theodore Gross, who wrote the book Black Capitalism, which inspired a number of minority leaders, including Representative Perry Mitchell, who was the leader of that effort. Anthony Robinson was around at that time. And the president signed an executive order that created the first agency in the country to address the business needs and the business development needs of minorities. Around that time, there were only about 300,000 minority-owned companies in the country. Now, 40 years later, since that time, that number has grown from 300,000 to over 6 million companies, almost 6 million. The headlines came out earlier this year that the fastest growing sector of the small business community was the minority business community. And the fastest growing ethnic minority of all was the African American business community, growing at 46%. Now, anyone reading that would have to assume that that was phenomenal progress. But having been around 4 decades and working with this picture, I knew that that picture did not tell the whole story. In fact, the more compelling story behind that phenomenal growth story is the fact that of the 6 million companies that we have today, only 3% of them are grossing $1 million a year. And as business representatives, I don't have to tell you $1 million company is not a very large company. 5 or 6 employees. You almost have to be $1 million company to be considered a viable enterprise. You're certainly not large enough to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are coming through from the Recovery Act funds. You'd have to be significantly larger to do that. So we're facing some real serious challenges. In fact, the trend line over 50 years that I've been involved in this effort has not changed significantly in 50 years. The disparity gaps that existed 50 years ago has not closed at all. Some have opened. When we talk about minority business development, we have to look at where we are today. In fact, just a few weeks ago, the Federal Reserve issued a report on minority economic development in America and found that the slow gains that were made over the past 2 decades were completely wiped away over the last 16 months. In fact, it was reported that the status of minority business and minority economic development in the country today is about what it was in the early 1990s. Those are the kinds of challenges that we face. So when we read the headlines that read phenomenal growth, we can easily get deluded into a mental state that we're doing great. All we have to do is keep up the momentum. We have some serious challenges before us. And I'm not here to deliver a keynote speech tonight, but I just want to say, Michael and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I'm just grateful that I was able to be a part of the 40-year effort to put things where they are now. And I'm encouraged to see a new emerging group of leaders emerging to kind of take that battle on to the next level. I just want to thank you again for this effort tonight, and I hope that we all benefit from the effort that we all make going forward. My thanks.